Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Free Agent Podcast. I am Meg Schmitz, and today I have an exceptional guest, someone I was introduced to just a couple of weeks ago, Brent Novoselsky, former NFL player, former Minnesota Viking, played 1 year for the Chicago Bears. He really is the epitome of why I do this podcast series. And that is, Brent is someone who went from franchise sports into business. He knows the value of that structure and is implementing a lot of great business practices, not only in his wealth management business, but also for the retired NFL players or the NFL Players Association in Chicago. Welcome, Brent, to the Free Agent.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. I've been doing some additional research into who you are, where you grew up. You're a local boy, as am I. I grew up in Wilmette. You grew up in Niles. So why don't you take my listeners back in time? You played football. Obviously, you grew up playing football and then were recruited into the NFL. Talk to us about your career in football and how that, as well as your business school experience, prepared you for business life after you retired.
Well, it's interesting. Wilmette, I actually grew up in Skokie. So my backyard was Wilmette. So very, very close. In fact, I had buddies that went to New Trier and they said, you should have come to New Trier. We would have won a state title. I was at Niles North, not much of a football powerhouse. But, the reality is we had football around us, but, I wasn't really recruited that heavily. In fact, I would have rather played baseball, but I couldn't hit a curveball. And that was the hardest thing. But I could hit another human being because they were a little bigger. And, I got bigger, I got stronger, I got faster. I started lifting weights. And all of a sudden, I started developing into a decent football player. And I wanted to go to Big Ten. I was going to go to Illinois. Michigan actually recruited me. They didn't recruit me for a scholarship. They recruited me and said, we're going to give you a preferred walk-on role, which I was thrilled for because I just wanted to get into their business school. And they were kind of recruited me lightly. They offered to pay my application fee to business school, which they never did. So I got calls from, the business school at Michigan saying, hey, we need your application fee. And I said, well, the football team's supposed to pay it. And they said, well, we have nothing to do with the football team. And I said, okay, keep telling that story if you want. But, and I kept calling the football team. And at the time, it was the early 80s and didn't have voicemail. And I'd get busy signals or I'd get, somebody just doesn't answer. And I finally wound up paying my own application fee just because I needed to know if I got into the school. So I paid it. Got into the school, coach calls me and says, hey, we want to set up your housing. Congratulations. I said, I'm not going to your school. You already lied to me about that. What else are you going to lie to me about? The reason I was able to do that is because one of my co-captain at Niles North in high school was a linebacker by the name of Nick Bruston, who, very smart guy. He's a lawyer now. He was going to Ivy League schools. He was going to Brown. Well, of course, once one Ivy League school recruits you, they all start recruiting you. They all start looking at film. So they're looking at film. And, the University of Pennsylvania came around, was looking at Nick's film and said, hey, who's this other guy in the film? He's pretty good. What are his grades? And they said, well, he's top 10. And they said, top 10%? No, top 10 in his class. I said, okay, we don't need a special spot for him. They didn't look at my SAT scores at the time because they actually did need a special spot for me based on those stupid tests. But I had done well in school. And coach came and said, hey, we've got a great business school here. And we've got a really good program that's just coming to life now. It was terrible for a long time, and we're getting better, and we're taking a bunch of kids from Chicago area. And I said, let me get this straight. I can go to the best business school in the nation and play football. I'm in. So I wound up going to Penn as opposed to Michigan, got my degree at Wharton, and wound up my first year with the Bears, which is another story that I'll tell you in a second. And my roommate that whole year with the Bears was Jim Harbaugh, who would have been my quarterback at Michigan if I were to have gone. And the whole crux of the story is basically I went on principle. Do you know how much it was? How much I wrote a check for my application to Michigan?
Thousands of dollars.
That was $15. Over $15. And it was more a principle of the matter. But I did well. I was all Ivy. We went undefeated my junior year of college, which was the first time. It was 1986. And it was the first time University of Pennsylvania had gone undefeated since like 1904. It's a pretty historical program. So that was very cool. And I was getting some looks from the league. But the reality is the only reason that I played pro football was my great uncle, Ben. Ben Novoselsky was just a tremendous judge in the probate system for the city of Chicago. I mean, he actually started his career under the first Mayor Daley. And he basically, what he did was he protected kids that needed protecting. And he did a wonderful job. He was on the bench way into his 80s, almost, I believe, into his 90s. And he passed in his mid-90s, but a phenomenal guy. And the crux of the story is back in the early 80s, George Halas died, the owner of the Bears. I mean, basically, Halas was the one that created the Bears in 1920 and played and coached, and he was the owner and very outspoken, very much a football guy. Well, George Halas was supposed to pass the Bears on to his son, Muggsy. And the unfortunate part was Muggsy died before George did. So Muggsy died, I believe, in the late 70s. And when George died, my great uncle helped settle the estate and was best friends with Ed and Virginia McCaskey, because Virginia is Virginia Halas McCaskey, and a wonderful lady, still around and very vibrant, and still very upset when the Bears lose, which is great to see. But the reason that I was on the Bears is because my great uncle would go out to dinner with Ed and Virginia McCaskey when I was a sophomore in high school, and they would go out on the weekends. And every time at dinner, he'd say, "I've got this great nephew at Niles North. He's a Jewish football player. He's awesome." For 6 years, he kept pumping me up. And finally, I graduate from Penn. The draft comes and goes. I don't get drafted. The day after the draft, I get a call from the Bears. "We want to sign you." Wonderful. So instead of going to graduation, I'm on a plane coming back here. I made $1,500 signing bonus. The minimum was $60,000 a year at that point, which great, no problem. I wound up going to the Bears. I got cut 3 times in training camp, and it's just I didn't know if I was going to last. 3 games into the season, Emory Moorhead, tight end here for years, breaks his leg. They called me back. I wound up playing for half the season. Mike Ditka has his heart attack. I didn't cause it. They put me on injured reserve for a couple of weeks to protect me. The last game of the season, they cut me and bring Jim McMahon back for the playoffs. I was released for a weekend. I go work out with the Packers. I come back. They re-sign me for the playoffs. I played in the Fog Bowl, which is famous in Chicago. Yeah. Played in the championship game against the 49ers. I played a lot, actually played pretty well. And then the season ends, and there's Plan B free agency, which basically says, look, we're going to let you protect your 48 best guys. I was never the 48th best guy. So I always had an opportunity during that time to go and look at the 30, well, how many was it at the time? 29 other teams, and see if they wanted my services. And the Packers wind up signing me. They gave me $25,000 to sign and $125,000 base. That was much better than $60,000. Plus, when I was in Chicago, I had to buy all my family tickets to games, and that came out of my pocket. Yeah. So I figured if I go to Green Bay, it's 180 miles away. Maybe it'll squelch some of the people coming up, which it probably wouldn't have. But I wound up going to the Packers and had a pretty good preseason with them, although I broke 3 cartilage in my ribs on a scrimmage and missed half a day of practice to get x-rayed. I came back with a flak jacket, and anybody that knows if they've ever had cartilage broken in the ribs and then you put a flak jacket on and you try to run around, you're going to have some issues. So when they cut me the last cut of the preseason, the coach said, and my position coach said, well, you seem to slow down after the scrimmage. And I said, well, I had broken cartilage. So, and then the head coach, Lindy Infante, he never said a word to me, which was weird. When I got cut by the Bears, Ditka sat down with every single player, spent 20 minutes with you, thanked you for all your hard work, told you what you needed to work on. And there was a respect there and appreciation with Lindy Infante, God rest his soul. But he, nothing. I mean, you talk about leadership and how you deal with people and just no clue. So they cut me loose. I'm back in Chicago on the streets again, looking for something to do, interviewing. And then a week later, the Vikings called me and said, come on up and practice. And I basically had retired. I was so sick of it. I'm like, screw this. I don't need this. People telling me they don't need me and I'm not good enough. And the Vikings call, I go up there. I literally packed a t-shirt and shorts and contact lenses. And I figured I'd be up and down. I figured they'd fly me in, fly me back. It's like, okay, I'll take a flight up to Minneapolis. I've never been there. And went there and they kept me, they worked us out. There was a bunch of us there. And then they kept me till like 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, what are you guys going to do? Can I go home? And they're like, no, we're going to sign you. And I'm like, oh, okay. And we signed me the same deal. I signed. And then thank goodness that week we were playing in Chicago. So
you go back home and get your stuff.
Right. Exactly. I talked to coach into letting me stay for an extra day, pack up my car and drive back up. And I did that and spent 6 years up in Minnesota. And, the good news is that first year in Minnesota, the last game of the season, we beat the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday Night Football. And I clinched the win with a touchdown over my shoulder catch and knocked the Packers out of the playoffs that year. So
beautiful story of retribution, isn't it?
Right. Loved it. So that was my football career. Basically, as a tight end on offense, I made over 100 special teams tackles, played in over 100 games, was captain of the special teams. And basically it was just do whatever you have to do to stay on the field and stay on the team and get paid and do what you needed to do. Because I lived on the bubble. I was one of those guys every year that they'd be like, oh, he's on the bubble. We're not sure we're going to keep him because, he's not fast enough, not strong enough, not whatever. But I was smart enough. I was always in the right place, the right time. I memorized my plays. I knew what I was doing. And look, the reality was I would have cleaned up the stadium if I needed to. They need me to put up chairs or take, garbage out or sweep or line the fields. Whatever it took, I would have done. Because it was fun. It was playing a kid's game, but we were getting paid like cash money.
And so the whole trajectory of all of that really also hinges on what I've read about your upbringing and how hard you worked in order to be on the field and to be in proximity of the players and the leadership. So you've really been grooming yourself all your career for greatness. It's the work ethic. It's the work ethic.
I mean, that's the one thing that, look, what you're given is what you're given. So the genetics, so I'm 6'2", maybe I'm shrinking a little bit, but I was 6'2", 245 pounds. Now, I was probably 225, but I was able to work out and put on muscle and, just nobody could outwork me. That's what I always thought. It's like, look, that's the one thing, I worked out with Chicago Bulls during their first run of championships. And I always said, look, you look at Michael Jordan and there's no way that I can compete with Michael Jordan. You look at our basketball skills. It's like on the threshold, it's like, okay, if I was the best that I could be, I could probably get to here. Michael, at the worst he could be, would be like up here. But there's still that, this is if I didn't work out, this if I didn't have any coaching, and I can improve on that to a certain level. And I looked at it the same way with guys that got drafted. We draft a guy in the first round to play tight end, and I come in and look at the guy and he was a stud, but I always knew if I outworked him and if I, was irreplaceable because I played all the special teams and I was where I needed to be. I was reliable. I ran a 4.7 40, which wasn't super fast, but if you looked at me on film, every kick and punt, I was the first guy down because it's, one of those things with, the lady that pulls the car off of her kid and gets super strength. I try to get that super strength. It's like the bear is chasing me. I better run really fast. And I did. And
sometimes you did have a bear chasing you.
Yes.
So in your At the end of your career, did you leave by choice, or were you?
Nope. I can't, like most people, carry off the field. I actually walked out of my own power, but it was a neck injury. So it was November 27th, 1994 at the Metrodome. And it was the second quarter against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I made a great hit. I came over, made a hit, and the guy's knee hit me in the shoulder and popped my disc out. My hands and feet were numb, and went for x-rays at halftime, and my career was essentially over. But I prepared for that. I mean, every off season I was working. So I'd work out with the Bulls in the morning because Al Vermeil and Eric Helland, who were their strength coaches at the time, I knew them, and they'd work me out. And I'd literally be stretching out with Pippen and Paxson and Will Perdue and Bill Cartwright. And, you get that whole aura of that first championship run by the Bulls. And I was inside working out with them. But at lunchtime, I would go downtown and I would work at Mesereau Financial. I worked at Lehman Brothers, and just doing the backroom stuff and just kind of gearing myself up and figuring out what do I want to do. Yeah. The helpful thing was I took a couple jobs that I knew this isn't what I want to do. So early on, I kind of knew exactly what I wanted to do. And then when I got hurt, again, it's all about who you know. I was playing pool with John Paxson in February, and I was about to get operated on. And Pax says to me, "What are you doing?" Yeah. After you get operated, I said, "Well, I'm done. I can't play anymore." He goes, "Why don't you talk to my agent, Harvey Weinberg? Harvey's an accountant in Highland Park. He knows everybody." I said, "Great." So I had lunch with Harvey, or a breakfast at Max's in Highland Park with Harvey, and I got up to pay the bill. And the whole time he was talking to me about John Mengelt, who had played for the Bulls and was doing some kind of PR business. I don't even know what he was doing, because as I got up to pay the bill, he said, "Go talk to Bob Levitz." And I said, "Who's Bob Levitz?" He said, "He runs Greater Chicago Group. They sell insurance and investments." And I said, "Well, I don't want to sell insurance, but I'll go talk to Bob." I talked to Bob, and 3 hours later, I'm selling insurance. So he's a great salesman, and I've been there 26 years. So I think he's done something right.
Well, and the important thing there for particularly, I think, for parents who are listening to this, who have a child who is athletic and wants to continue with sports, it's having a plan after the career is over, because there's going to be an end to the career. So you had been in business school and had been preparing yourself. But what I've also learned in talking to other players is that your group of mentors, your posse, is really instrumental in helping you move forward with that confidence.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of guys who are not moving forward with confidence. They don't have the strength of the posse that you do.
Well, and that's huge, because being Jewish and growing up in Skokie, I still have a lot of my same friends from kindergarten. I've got a lot more friends from different walks of life, but I still have my group that we basically went to elementary school together. And that's the big thing, is that people tend to elevate you. Where in other cultures, they kind of bring you down. And that's gigantic. It is definitely who you surround yourself with. I mean, I remember stories from a good friend of mine, Randall McDaniel, who I play with the Vikings, who's now in the Hall of Fame. And Randall came out of a tough neighborhood in Arizona. And he would tell stories about, he couldn't park his Mercedes in the driveway when he went back, because everybody would come out of the woodwork. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's great. When I go home, everybody comes out of the woodwork and they're, congratulations, high fives, I want to talk to you. He goes, no, they come out and they all want money. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I have no problem giving money to people, but it's like everybody comes. And it's just that, hey, you've made it. Let me guilt you into giving me some money. You just don't get that when you surround yourself with the right people. And that's the thing about, when you've got to be very careful when you're playing, you attract certain type of people, and they're what we call jock sniffs, and people that just want you because you're part of, the aura. They like that. And then all of a sudden you're done and they drop you. They ghost you. You're done. Yep. Because all they want to do is they want to deal with that. They want to, they only want you if you're playing. And it's sad, but it's something that you realize, and you realize the people that really care about you and like you and know you, and the ones you can rely on. And that's a great point, is the people you surround yourself with. And that's at any level, but especially when you're, in the league. And like, the average career is less than 3 years. So I more than doubled it. And it's a tough business when you're dodging bullets all the time. But the other tough part about it, and it is absolutely right down your lane, is from day one. I never played Pop Warner, but I did play in high school and beyond. So from day one, you're set on this rail. You're set on this path. You've got coaches telling you exactly where you need to be every hour of the day, what you need to be doing. You've got this kind of plan to run on, and then all of a sudden one day, and it's immediate, you get the rug pulled out from under you, and then it's like, okay, you're on your own, do your thing. And even though I had a career, the first thing I did, I went to the trainer in my office, not the medical trainer, but the business trainer, and I said, well, give me a path to run on. We don't really have a path. You kind of make your own. I'm like, I've never done this before. I need kind of guidance. So I think that's where, a franchise can offer that type of guidance, those type of rails. And I think guys that have done the football thing or military, I think it's hand in hand. Everybody says, well, football is very much like being in war. It's not. You're not going to get killed. Those aren't guns and bullets. It's dangerous. You're definitely got your head on a swivel. You're definitely relying on everybody else. It's a simulated war, but it's a simulated. It's like a video game where you can actually physically get hurt. So, but it is that, I find so many of the former players that just they're kind of clueless because they've always been told kind of what to do. And then all of a sudden they don't have that anymore. And they need some kind of buffer around them. They need some kind of path to follow. And I think the franchise model can work very well for a lot of these guys. And that's the other thing too, is trying to talk to these guys about, you can't keep going back to the league and they're not going to keep giving you handouts. Now, we did get increases in our pensions. Thank God. It's the right thing to do. They did it. But, to keep going back, you need to now take what you've got from the NFL and then springboard that forward and utilize that just to get you into areas. I used it to get me in to talk to people that might not have talked to me before. For me, it's an entree. And then what you do after you get in, well, that's all my Penn education. That's all my experience and everything that I've done. So, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. And I think guys are a lot smarter. They're more prepared, but that comes with, offering these guys more tools in the off season, to continue their education, to finish their education, to, go in different paths and experiment and, really do the holistic approach for these kids. These kids, I believe we were better football players back in the day. I think these kids are unbelievable athletes. I think they're so much better athletes, obviously, from physics standpoint. I'm 6'2". These guys are 6'7", 6'8" now, running 4.5 40s, 4.4 40s. Physically, that's like shooting a bullet. That's crazy. But I do think we were tougher. I think we were better football players, but they're much better athletes now. But I think they also are smarter with their brands and with what they're doing. And they've got the technology now. But they just it's interesting because my son went to university. He went to Western Michigan University, and he played 5 years there actually, and got his MBA. And he's a little Jewish kid. He's only 6'5". He was 315 pounds. He's down to about 250 now, looking great. But it's that methodology, and that college football, D1 college football, is like playing pro ball now. Mm-hmm. And it's the same type of thing. And you've got opportunities, and you've got these opportunities. You just got to take advantage of them.
Well, yeah, my husband and I talk a lot about how much better athletes are. He played championship team rugby, University of Chicago. So very smart guy, knock him down, catch the ball, run. That's Pete. He's very basic. And he thinks at a very high level. He's an algorithm writer. He's former trader on the floor. Another great stadium of athleticism is the Options Exchange and other trading floors in Chicago. But how these athletes now are being groomed more. You were telling me a couple of weeks ago how when you left the league and you started your new job, you wish that there were those guardrails and train tracks to run on as you'd been groomed in your professional career, your athletic career. And is there a backfill for that now in the league? Are they doing a better job of preparing athletes for when they are either retired unwittingly or retire on purpose?
It's always retired unwittingly. There's only a few people in this league have ever retired on purpose. Barry Sanders was one of them. Jim Brown was another. And that's, just a handful. Everybody doesn't want to leave. It just happens. You are pulled out of there. But they have done a much better job of offering these programs. Now, guys still have to take advantage of them. And there's a lot of guys that don't, but most guys do. So they've done a wonderful job because it used to just be team by team. And now the league has done it. And the union is very strong with that. And the owners have done their share with the trust, the NFL trust that's come out, which was formed through collective bargaining agreement back, I think, 2011.
Okay.
But there is definitely structure now. There's money behind it. I mean, you're talking about billions of dollars that are made in this league. And they're finally doing the right PR thing by taking care of their players and their former players.
And so with you and your career, when you first started with GCG and you were talking about wishing that there were guardrails, is there any one habit that you have learned and adopted that has been a game changer for your business?
Well, 100%. And that's really dealing with the human capital, which you're dealing with people and finding a way to make sure that you're building that human capital and building friends and building people who like you and building mentors and building people you mentor. And the reality is 2008 was really the turning point in that. I was doing a decent job beforehand, but in 2007, I discovered LinkedIn. And I'm like, this is really cool. This is great. This is a way for me to kind of collect people and get messages out and kind of keep them front of mind. And then 2008 happened. And the wonderful thing about that is the people that I was connecting with in 2007 were stockbrokers and people in my business and real estate people and IT people. And it's like, is there any CEOs on? No CEOs would ever get on this thing. All of a sudden, 2008 happened. The rug flew under. And all of a sudden, you got all these CEOs. You got all these C-suite people that are looking for gigs. And they're like, oh, crap. What do I do? Oh, I got to network now. Well, how do I network? Well, here's LinkedIn. And it was perfect timing. And all of a sudden, these very successful people who in the past, you would have to stake out their office. You would have to call their secretary. You'd have to get through. I mean, it was all those cold calling cowboy type. Yeah. How do I get in front of these folks? Call them before 8:00 in the morning. Get in front of them some way or another. And all of a sudden now they were opening themselves up to say, "Hey, we're here and let's network." Like, okay, you want to network? Wonderful. Let's network. So, that opened up, obviously, with social media and social networking. You got the other side of the coin. So, it's really key. It's not just wishing somebody a happy birthday when it's their birthday. It's putting in those messages and personalizing them and really figuring out ways that to set yourself apart and giving back to younger people or people that, a lot of it was just, let me introduce you to somebody that maybe help you on the next step of your journey. Who can I get you connected to, that if we were having coffee and they ran into us, I would introduce you to. Yeah. And say, hey, you really should be talking to this person.
Yes. And so I have found the same thing to be true here in the last 12 to 14 months. The pandemic was a perfect pivot into not only LinkedIn and connecting. You said something and it made me think that connecting with intent is really the only way to leverage LinkedIn in a truly beneficial way. It's not connecting, just like you were saying with the players and their posse of friends. They're rubbing elbows because you're famous, because there's money, because if you leverage especially LinkedIn in the appropriate way and really read through someone's profile, connect with intent, create, like you said, human capital. People love to talk about themselves, but people want to connect with other people, not because of what you do, but because of who you are.
And don't ask me to join your network. I hate that. Give me a personalized, it just has to be a couple sentences. Why are you trying to connect with me? And don't just say, well, I just came across your name. Okay, great. But, for me, it's, hey, you know what? I know so-and-so. And what I do is I always try to get an introduction. And I always try to give introductions. I'll just take two people on LinkedIn and I'll just message both of them and say, hey, you two need to meet. Here's why. And usually they connect and it's no big deal. But don't make me sleuth it. Don't make me figure out, well, how do I know this person? Why is this person connecting with me? Because most of the time I'm just saying no. I mean, and usually I'm very open to letting people in because I want more people in because I want to fish in a barrel. I don't want to fish in the ocean. And I'm building my barrel. I've got a great barrel of folks that not only I want to help them. I mean, and truly, I want to help them with whatever it is that they need help with, whether it's their business, their kids need a job, they've got some personal issues, whatever they need. I've got resources. I've got people that I know that I can tap into. And I love doing that because in my job, it's not about selling somebody something. It's about meeting a need and making sure that at the worst possible time, if something does happen, we've got them covered. And then the best of times, kids graduating college and retirement and finally being able to do whatever they want. And retirement has been completely changed. It's more financial independence. It's not, hey, I want to just go do nothing or go play golf, because it's like you go retire and play golf. I'm a decent golfer, but if I had to play every day, I'd get worse. And I don't want to do that every day because, why do you get up in the morning and you need a purpose and you need something to do? But it's changed. It's financial independence and doing what you want. And all of a sudden, this pandemic has forced people to really figure out what's important. And, now that things are kind of moving back to normal, do we want to get right back into that rut, or do we want to keep some kind of hybrid going? And, it's interesting because my business has always been in person. It's always been face-to-face. And I've done a lot now in the last year and a half just through Zoom. But I was doing this before because I don't want to be in Chicago when it's crappy out. And that's January, February, March, and probably April, sometimes May. But I want to be somewhere nice. So I have set this up over 3 years to say, look, I'll be in town when I'm in town, but when I'm out, we can still do business. I'm still here. I'm still open for business. And, maybe in the back, I'm going to have palm trees and surf going in. But that's what I set myself up for. And of course, this year when I thought I'd start taking advantage, we weren't able to. So, but it's set up for that. I mean, that's the purpose. And, the Zoom, I think there's always going to be a place for these type of meetings, for this. I mean, these interviews are great. I would have to show up at a studio, and I don't have to park. This is easy. I turn on, turn off. But then getting groups together, like my boards on my nonprofits, you can get 8 people and do a 7 o'clock meeting at night and be done by 8, and people turn it off in their home. And so you have to adjust, you have to pivot. But I think it's that human capital that we all deal in. I mean, it's really, if somebody's going to do a job where a computer can do it, then you're going to be out of a job soon. And it's like being a cab driver in New York City when Uber came. You can keep on banging that, but this is the reality. This is life. So I try to use as much technology as I can and embrace it. But I know from the financial standpoint, there are people involved and people want to deal with people. And if we can get things resolved with technology, wonderful. But you want to have a fallback to say, hey, I need help here. I need to talk to you as a human being. So there's got to be that underside. And I think people have got to look for that. But the jobs that are going to be around 5-10 years from now, we don't even know they exist. But I think my job's safe because I look at all the folks that are retiring and they still need that hand holding.
Well, and your point of view is, again, back to the human. You've pivoted from the field into the office. You've figured out how to be successful. But what you have possessed probably forever is that human interest, the problem solving. Selling insurance is not selling insurance. It's solving a problem. And everything else that your company does is planning and being thoughtful and methodical, and all those great underpinnings that you had in your training coming up are serving you well. You may not have had the guardrails when you first got started, but you have the personality. And there is something about being from the North Shore. We're just a social, convivial group of people that,
you ask questions and you truly want to hear the answer. That it's not the ask. It's not, like I say, when you play golf, you learn a lot about people. What I've learned through golf is when you're on the 19th hole having a drink, when somebody asks you about your game or your shot or something, they could care less. It takes them 2 seconds and they're into their game. They just want to tell you about them. And it's the same thing in life. It's like they may ask you something, and a lot of people want to know about your kids, but they really want to tell you about their kids. And I got a great job because my job requires me to hear about these things and to say, okay, well, here's an interesting thing happened to me, but tell me about you and tell me more about you. And the more you can ask about people, the more interesting they think you are and the smarter they think you are. So the less you talk, the smarter you appear. And the more you talk, which I like hearing myself speak here, so I've got to kind of it's one of those things, but the quicker you can get kind of control that. And then business and technology kids that are out there that are studying, take some psychology.
Yeah.
Know it yourself. You'll need it. You'll use it. It's just like business. You'll always be able to use it. I don't care what field you're getting into, medicine, psychology, and just understanding the way the human mind works and feelings and emotions. And, that's not going away anytime soon. In fact, I think it's only getting more intense because we have limited out, yes, you have social media now, but it's just so two-dimensional, and it's such a, it's a negative. It's not a good place to be. It's very toxic. So I think we need to get back in person. We need to be able to debate, be able to talk about ideas without dropping mics on people and making it all far left, far right. It's like, I'm a good Jew. So what does that mean? I'm middle of the road, Republican on financial, Democratic on social. That's what we do. And it's never leaning too far either way.
Yeah.
And it's a very uncomfortable place to be today in our world. And it's
very divisive.
I got CNN and Fox that I kind of tennis match. And I'm like, there's two different worlds going on. And then I go to the BBC to figure out what's really going on in the world. So,
and that's funny because they'll tell you that they're listening to our news because the BBC is so one-sided. It's fascinating to talk to people, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. I have the benefit of talking to people all over the world. Well, you do too. This is Zoom. We get to meet people we never would have met before. But I had an interview with a gal recently who said she watches Fox. I'm sorry, and she's English. So she's just outside of London. Just BBC, forget the BBC.
Well, it's infotainment. I mean, so I try to get my information, and it's hard to get your information from a truly, who's truly independent now. I mean,
that is a really good point too. That it makes me think, how do I build trust with somebody? It's a very bad place to be too politically motivated or to speak too much towards the political situation. It is really toxic out there. And so for you to develop a network of trusted clients and additional mentors and resources, there's some editing that needs to take place.
Tremendous editing and tremendous filtering. And it's really just finding out where people stand and then kind of understanding their point of view. It's like, okay. I mean, but that's what we do as financial advisors anyway, is that, look, I can tell you what I'm planning, but I'm going to stand in your shoes and say, here's what you should be doing. Not because I'm doing it, because this is what fits kind of what you need to be doing. So that nature. And then it's, okay, well, tell me about your political views. And I don't ever ask that, but people, and then it's like, okay, well, why do you feel that way? What's your background? Well, I've done research. Where have you done research? On the internet. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can't really trust all that.
So,
I am wondering if there's anything I have not asked you or any particular point that you wanted to make sure you covered today.
I just kind of ramble. So, no, I think we covered a lot of great points. I just, based on what you were doing, I think you're providing a tremendous resource, and I think people need to know it's out there and know it's an opportunity. I mean, when I got out, the biggest thing was McDonald's. I looked at doing a McDonald's restaurant, and I think it was 50 grand to get in. And, unfortunately I did, or fortunately, who knows? I mean, who knows? My life is pretty good now.
Yeah.
But what would it have been if I would have been a franchisee? Who knows? But, there's so many opportunities out there, and, you see so many people wanting to do their own business. I mean, my son's got 3 businesses, and he's got his own.
Yeah.
That's wonderful that you can do that, but there are businesses out there that are already preset, and, you just need to follow instructions, add water and obviously a little bit more. But I think there's opportunities, and it's not for everybody, but nothing's for everybody. So just know what's out.
Part of the wealth management plan for everyone that I talk to, and I'm working with a couple of people right now who are 29 to 35, and then I've got heavily skewed the other direction is really the 60 plus into, I've got someone who's 73 right now who I'm working with. Talk about a retirement plan. He does not want, he's like a thoroughbred in the barn. He's off the field, out of business and out of the business realm, but
Right.
looking for a way to continue to be relevant and useful and financially rewarded. And that's what you help people do as well. So Brent, if people wanted to reach out to you, and not via LinkedIn, but they wanted to learn more about what you are doing, whether that's the NFL Players Association or GCG or any of your other charitable efforts, how can they reach out to you?
So they could email me. It's just my name, Brent, Brent.Novoselsky, Novoselsky. It's a lot easier than it sounds. It's just Novoselsky. And then it's at GCG, or girlcatgirlfinancial.com. Obviously, you can look me up on LinkedIn. Reach out. I'm happy to talk to anybody and just give them my 2 cents. And as long as you got the right things in mind, I'm happy to talk to you. And
let them know that they heard about you on the Free Agent podcast. Absolutely. Frame of reference is important, everybody. It's important when you're reaching out. Well, Brent, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been enlightening, and I knew that I knew this would be a very leggy, rangy conversation, and I didn't want to ask too many questions because I knew that you had a particular point of view, and I so appreciate everything that you have shared with us today. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.